will now be recorded.
Joe, on the consent agenda.
Good to go.
Ex officio.
Good to go.
I'm just waiting for Don to... Good evening. I'd like to call to order the December 9th, 2020 Harwich Board of Selectmen's meeting. To back up a moment, we did actually open the meeting at 6:15. We then went into executive session to discuss contract negotiations with the Harwich Employees Association. It was a short discussion, and that negotiation will continue. We then moved out of open session, out of the executive session back to open meeting. I'll start this then by asking Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Joe, we'll go to you and Megan for the COVID-19.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We've had a lot going on.
Quite a bit, actually. Yeah. Before I recognize our Public Health Director, I want to explain a few things. I've put my camera on simply because I'm going to do a lot of speaking, and my mouth is no longer visible because of mask wearing. Megan is going to tell you the efforts that she and her team have been embarking on since last Monday's announcement by Governor Baker. But before we get into her update, I did want to bring to the board's attention and seek your input on, given that my understanding of what Governor Baker and his administration have rolled out last week, and it's an effort to really modify behaviors of everybody going forward as we go into the cold and flu season, which is also understood to be a time of year when we expect to see pandemic cases increase, and we've already seen that. I would ask the board's indulgence that this be the last meeting in person going forward until further notice, and that we resume go-to-meeting directly. The room that we're all in right now, we're all distancing by 6 feet or more, but the new guidelines are whether you're a distance of 6 feet or more, you maintain your mask. And I think it's going to be difficult to project and difficult to really engage in conversations with the masks on for a late period of time. And if nothing else, I'll be ensconced in my office every Monday night participating from there. But I also think it's important for us, for the board and administration, to demonstrate to the community that as we go into this next phase of surge and uptick in cases, that we demonstrate that we're taking it seriously and leading by example.
Okay.
So I just put that out there for the board's consideration.
Thank you, Joe. Megan, I guess it's your turn then. Is that right, Joe?
Yeah, unless there was discussion on that point. Megan, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you.
Wait a minute, just one question. I think discussion was we will follow your recommendation and go to remote for the time being.
Yeah, and we'll do regular check-ins to see how it's going.
Regular check-in and see how it's going. It opens
Thank you for
up
that.
a bit. Okay. Hello, Megan, sorry.
Hey, Larry. Good to see you guys. We have just a quick numbers update. And since Friday, unfortunately, we've had 4 additional new cases come about in just the last 4 days. So that brings our total up to 179, and we're following 6 active cases. So we are seeing an increase in the numbers, not just from a trigger event or a cluster event. We're seeing them in different areas, different reasons for positives. In your packet, you'll see that I gave you all a list of where the clusters are happening. It's an interesting list. Just of the past 30 days of October, it shows where the majority of the cases are coming from. And that really drove the new orders that the governor came out with. If you look at it, you can see that thousands of cases are household contacts, where a person coming into the house who's positive maybe not quite knowing they transmit it to the rest of the household. And that's where a lot of the positives are coming. So we're used to seeing a few household members that are positive from the place that they work at, like a healthcare facility, perhaps they do close personal care or something like that. But then they're spreading it into their household. And from there's that asymptomatic time period where people are going out and gathering and spreading it to other people. So we're seeing household contacts. Household transmission is the major source of COVID right now in Massachusetts. And when you look through that list, you can see that there are other areas that we're seeing clusters in daycares, some in workplaces, but very few in office settings. We're seeing them in some restaurant food courts, but it's more food courts than restaurants. In here in Harwich, we're seeing mostly the household contacts, someone who had been in contact with a positive, not just getting it out in the open and not knowing where they got it from. So right now, Harwich isn't seeing community spread. We know where these people are getting COVID from, and it's usually through a household contact or from a gathering that they've gone to.
I found
And once
that
again,
remarkable, Megan.
Go ahead, Larry.
That's what, just to emphasize what you said, basically 80% of the cases come from households, which is it's remarkable.
Yes.
Number. Now, so I'm glad you spoke to that. I was also, you have the social gatherings are fairly small. Do social gatherings, does that comprise also political people, for the election standing around? Is that, where are they included? I couldn't pick that out, those types of activities.
I believe those are in the social gatherings category. Thankfully, we did not see positives coming out of either political rallies or other types of rallies that the public gathered for. So we were lucky, and again, probably because those were mostly outside, and we see much higher transmission when it's inside.
Thank you.
Larry?
Don?
Yeah. Speaking of that, this came up in my church this Saturday afternoon. What are the rules for churches for services indoors?
So churches, places of worship do have their own sector-specific rules, and they're separate from retail spaces. They're able to have up to 40% capacity. So whatever the size of the church is, they're able to have 40% of that capacity. And they do have to have social distancing among parties that aren't within their own household. So you'd be able to sit with people in your own household. But aside from that, the church would need to have enough space to separate the rest of the patrons 6 feet apart from each other. You are able to be indoors or outdoors, and so they can go above that 25-person indoor gathering rule, and that you are allowed to sing at church. And that is different from performance standards in other sectors. Singing is not allowed indoors yet, with the exception of religious ceremonies.
So the dictating factor would actually be on a smaller building, would be the distancing, not the capacity number.
Right. So you'd have to be able to meet both of those things, and whichever one limits you, you'd have to go with the smaller number.
Thank you.
Thank you, Megan.
Sure.
Thanks, Megan.
Sure. Department of Public Health once again changed their mapping metrics for incidence rates. So we were so used to seeing that yellow, green, gray, red map based on a certain metric, and they changed it. So no longer is it coming out on Wednesdays, it's coming out on Fridays. And they've actually made it better. They've made it so it's more accurate for a smaller community like ours. We were being lumped together with every community with our incidents. It was all based on over 100,000 people, and we only have 12 or 13,000 people. So with the new metric, we have a better idea of when things raise from gray to green to yellow to red. So we're back in the gray, where previously we were yellow. We are following 6 active cases now, and what they do is they calculate how many new cases you've had in the last 7 days. So we will probably stay gray unless we have a large cluster event. We'd have to have over 13 cases in a week in order for us to move to the next color. But even the next color, we're still far from being red. So I feel very confident that we'll be able to stay in the lower risk communities. Other things that DPH came out with on Thursday, Friday were in reference to the schools. The Department of Education, Secondary Education, DESE, they have really put a pressure on the school systems to resume in-person learning, complete in-person learning, unless you're in a red community. So I haven't had a chance to talk to Scott Carpenter on how he feels he can meet that. Social distancing is still required, but in schools, since we're not seeing a big transmission happening within schools, the DESE guidelines say you can sit kids 3 feet apart, as long as there's mask wearing and all of that. We have had some kids that are positive in school, but they're not getting it from school, and so far they're not spreading it within the school. So that's also a positive thing for kids and parents, and everyone being able to possibly get back to fully in-person schooling. Again, the busing is the same with almost half capacity. So there'll be some limitations on how we can get kids there, and how many kids we can fit in a classroom that keep that 3 to 6 foot distancing. But the governor's office is putting a really strong hold on trying to get kids back in school, in-person learning as much as possible. So other than that, the other...
To that point, Megan,
somebody have a question?
if I read we've had what, 2 or 3 students in Monomoy come up positive, and maybe 1 at Cape Cod Tech, 1 or 2, is that?
1 teacher at Cape Cod Tech, 1 student at the high school in Monomoy, and we've had a bunch of contacts. So we've only had 1 positive student. We have kids that live in Harwich that are positive that go to other schools, but we've been pretty low with the kid numbers.
Okay, great.
Yeah, parents should feel pretty confident that the schools are doing everything they can to keep all the kids safe. When they did have that 1 positive, I'm sorry, we've had 2 positive kids, you are right, in the high school. They alert all the families that are within that classroom, even if they're not considered close contacts of being within 6 feet of that positive child. They're alerting the entire classroom parents, so they're able to watch for signs and symptoms of maybe their child getting sick. So the other orders we have that I brought up last Monday, the gatherings order, the face masks in public order, the 9:30 closure of a lot of businesses, and then the stay-at-home advisory of being home in your own household after 10. We haven't had too many questions about those yet. We have had some calls about people not paying attention to the new mask order. So what we're doing, last week I'd asked the police department to put up their electronic signs, a couple signs throughout town, 1 near Stop and Shop, 1 near Shaw's, and then we also have the sandwich board type signs that were on Route 28 when that area was the only mandatory mask area. And this week we're re-lettering those and putting them around town. We're taking this promote, educate, thought process rather than quick enforcement right now. I myself violated the governor's mask order and took my dog for a walk on Saturday without a mask. And it takes a whole new mindset to when you know you're going to a place and not going into a store to remember to put your mask on. So first step is always going to be educate, make people aware. We'll put some things on Facebook and the town website and some big signs around town just to get people back in the swing of putting their mask on all the time. So the police are not enforcers on the mask order. They're able to assist me or my staff if we come across an issue that needs their assistance. But their job is not to patrol the town and look for people violating the mask order. The mask order is a governor's order. It gives enforcement authority just to local public health and Department of Public Health with the assistance of the state and municipal police officers. Other things we've been doing this week is Katie and I have been holding go-to meetings with department heads. We have quite a few left to do this week, but we've checked in with department heads to kind of do a COVID check-in to make sure that they're doing okay with current and projected changes as far as the wearing masks all the time, even when you're in the building and you're 6 feet away from someone. So we've met with everyone, well, I'd say about 70% of everyone, and they have been able to ask questions freely and get answers to questions that they've had. And we're able to kind of talk through concerns that some of their staff have had over the last few months, that, sometimes you just don't get a chance to really talk with me, because I'm not always available to the department heads or their staff, and they have questions for me, so I'm happy to answer those. And I also was able to survey each department for their remote working capabilities to see if we did have to move to a more spread out model here within the town, making sure that department heads and key players within their departments are able to access files electronically, that they're able to print things and scan things if they're away from their desk, and really get a sense of where the choke points are within our organization as far as where people are too close together. Our goal is to have 0 close contacts within town or the town organization. So we need to make sure we have social distancing options, and a lot of offices have already been spread out and moved, but we could do a little better in a few areas. So we're taking stock of where we're at, and over the next week or two, we will look at other options in case we do need to ratchet things down and separate ourselves even more. We did a public alert message. You must have gotten that on Friday or Thursday. So we did alert the public to some changes. So I think we've done a lot as far as PSAs and getting the word out on the changes. We will continue to work on communication with the public about the risks and benefits of wearing a mask. That's all I have.
That's enough, Megan.
Thanks, Megan.
Thank you. Has that changed any of our activities, say in the community center or the landfill, or, is it just more pressure to wear masks and be careful? Is that?
The sports guidance came out and was updated to reflect the mask order. So previously, some sports like volleyball or basketball, if they were able to maintain social distancing, they didn't have to wear the mask while they were playing. And this new change does require masks to be worn at all times. So that was a change to the programs that were taking place at the community center, pickleball over at the cultural center too. The players now have to wear masks as well as all the spectators, even if they can social distance. But aside from that, our gatherings were still limited to 25 inside. So that didn't change for us.
Steve, excuse me, Ed?
Yeah, just the last couple days on, what's it called, Next Door or Neighborhood? I forget, it's one of these
The websites, I guess.
website things that have been set up to sort of encourage communications inside different neighborhoods. A rather robust discussion of mask wearing on the bike trail and people questioning the science and wanting to know where the reports were, and a whole variety of discussion about it. And it was sort of getting a little bit mean-spirited, and I normally don't participate in things like that, but I entered the fray and basically said, you know, it really doesn't matter where the science is or what you believe or what you feel you want to do. At this point, it's been an emergency order of the governor that you wear masks, you know, and whether you think that's right, wrong, or different, that's the law now. And just for all our sakes, please follow the rules so we all can be safe. But you know, it's in some cases, like on the bike trail, intuitively people think they know better, and you know, who's to say? But it really doesn't matter. The guideline or regulation has been promulgated, and we're all, as good citizens, should be following it.
Thank you, Ed. Megan, anything else? Any other questions? I'm always pleased to see that you're keeping busy, Megan.
We've been busy. I just ask that if people have complaints about mask wearing or the mask order, and they would like to alert the health department, email is best. And we are keeping a log of areas that we tend to get more complaints on. So we can perhaps place a sign in a better location where we're not able to patrol the areas for mask wearing, but we may be able to see trends and where people are complaining the most, and we may be able to do some targeted awareness campaigns in those areas.
Thank you. Anyone else? Joe, we'll move on then.
Thank you. Thank you, Megan. Turn it over to
Thank you.
the Executive Director of our Chamber of Commerce. Cindy?
Good evening, everyone. Oh, I don't have my camera on. Okay, not that you really need to see me, but no new updates really from the business perspective. I'll talk, I'm sure, later on one of the other subjects about the hardships for establishments. But everyone's just continuing on, doing their best that they can to follow the new orders. And I haven't heard anything regarding the curfews, so seems to have been all right this weekend.
Okay. Thank you, Cindy.
Unless anyone has any questions for me, we should be okay until later.
Okay. Questions for Cindy? Thanks again, Cindy. We'll move on then. I guess we public comment, Joe?
Just very quickly, I heard from the DPW Director this morning, just reminding the residents that as you go to the landfill, you may see that there's a slight detour in place. They're doing work at the C and D area of the landfill, so they're redirecting people to the brush area. They expect that work to go throughout the week, but shouldn't impact on anybody, just rerouting within the establishment.
Okay. Deal. And Caleb, no one's called in for public comment, so we'll.
Want me to do
Consent
that?
agenda?
Yeah, consent agenda. Vote to approve the Caleb Chase request in the amount of $888.32. Vote to accept the appointment of Catherine Greene to the Community Preservation Committee, term ending 6/30/2021.
Is there a second?
Second.
Don, I know you and Ed made one of our chairmen, namely the CPC chair, very happy to have a quorum.
Yeah, I did want to mention that because it's not in the text here, but that's an ex officio appointment that she's been on it before. That's the reason
Right.
we're doing it. He's having a real rough time getting to quorums there. And Dave and I spoke about it, and Ed and I spoke about it, so.
That's great, because they're coming up to speed now, reviewing all their applications. Any other comment, questions? I'll take we have a motion. I'll do a roll call. Steve?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so. Moving next to new business.
Can we do it, or?
Sure. Thank you,
Discussion
Steve.
and possible vote, reduction of payment on agreement of lease, hot stove at Cranberry Valley.
Joe, I guess we'll put this in your court. Yeah, you gave us a lengthy explanation, but it's, maybe you can just review that.
Sure. As you recall, the golf director had advised me that the golf operating committee had asked for a reduction in the agreement with, I'm drawing a blank, I want to say Miller Golf, and had mentioned that a similar effort would be coming from the golf committee to the Board of Selectmen. So the request is for a reduction in payment to the hot stove agreement with the town due to the effects of the pandemic. I know later on in your meeting, you're going to be discussing potential for hardship exemptions. And generally speaking, I would always ask the board to hold the line on revenue. In this particular example, though, we're talking about monies that would have gone back to the revolving fund for the golf. So it has no impact on general revenue fund. So I would recommend that the board adopt the request as presented by the golf committee.
I was, I guess not surprised, but interested. He's asking for a required reduction, but he also, I think, is listed, I'm guessing, I have in front of me, 12 functions that were canceled at the golf course this, that may be off one or two, but huge number of functions that he would have gotten revenue on this summer. So that's, in addition to the golf course being closed until, what, mid-June, I think, they started,
Correct.
started allowing people to go inside again. So it's really been short. Don?
Yeah, I'll move that we accept the recommendation of Roman Greer and Clem Smith to reduce the lease payments as
Second.
For a
offered.
second. Is there any other discussion?
I just want to say,
Yeah.
on top of what you were saying, is they, up until COVID-19 hit, they were running a really good operation there, and it's
Yeah, absolutely.
it has nothing to do with anything other than something that's way beyond everyone's control.
Thank you, Don. I'll take a roll call then. Steve?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Ed?
Aye.
Don? Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Discussion and possible vote, Board of Selectmen meetings minutes, December the 16th, 2019, December the 23rd, 2019, February the 18th, 2020.
Mr.
For
Chair.
a second.
Second.
Any comments? I have to admit, I hate to say this because it makes me look lazy in the past. These are so well written. I've been reading them.
They're excellent.
And as you know, I've been saying that you should be able to pick these up in 10 years and be able to reconstruct in your head exactly what transpired.
Yeah.
It's more than just a motion and a vote. They're
Yep.
excellent minutes.
Very excellent. I'll take a roll call then. Don?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
Discussion and possible vote, employment contract for the interim town planner, Charlene Greenhall.
Joe, you want to walk us through this? What you're, I know
Sure.
you've given us
It's,
a lot of thought and
Absolutely.
planning
It's a
going forward.
multi-pronged approach. As we all know, unfortunately, for us, but many happy returns for Charlene. She is well on her path to retiring at the end of this month. And so, as I've said to the board and others when asked, anytime that there is a vacancy, I take the opportunity to look at reorganization opportunities and be presenting, hopefully within the next 2 weeks, to the board a rather significant reorganization that touches upon administration as well as community development that would touch upon the planning role. Charlene has graciously offered to remain in the role of interim town planner. In accordance with the personnel bylaws, it would be for a 90-day period. It's not meant to be a lengthy matter, and Charlene will be able to help us continue to staff planning board meetings, with the exception of one meeting in particular, but also keep some certain projects going while the search is underway for, I won't say her replacement, but perhaps the next person to offer planning services to the town. And so the format that you can see there is similar to contract language we've used before. And I thank Bob Lawton for his efforts on that. And you can see that Charlene and I have executed it, and I would look for the board's endorsement of this contract.
Comments or questions? I have one, Joe. What's your timeline for posting the, you're going to do the organizational look first, and then there'll be, you're looking
So,
in
yeah, so
2 or
Bob
3
and I
weeks
are
down
meeting-
the road?
Yeah, Bob and I are meeting tomorrow, Bob Lawton and I are meeting on Tuesday for me to give him the framework of the reorganization, which ties into this position. Like I said, I'm hoping to present it to the board, if not the 16th, certainly by the 23rd. And then soon after, we would initiate the search for the planner position.
Okay. And I just have one other quick comment, Steve, if I may, is that we've had a lot of discussion about the goals, Joe's goals and objectives. And one of the objectives was to look at organization with the opportunity to, for efficiency and communication. And so very pleased that you're following saying our goals that we've set.
Thank
you. Steve?
Joe, do you think we can get that done in the 90-day window that we would have Charlene available to us, or is that?
I'm hopeful. You know, really, when you'll see the reorganization, it's meant to, you know, Charlene will tell you that we got, well, I hope she'd tell you, we got lucky with someone like Charlene, and I don't want to say dying breed and all that, but finding someone of her caliber and quality on Cape Cod could be difficult. So what I'm trying to do is look at that position to see if there's any way that we can enhance it in consultation with Charlene, and then probably attract the broadest pool possible to get someone in. And I'm hopeful that we can do it in that expedited timeframe.
Okay. So you need a vote on this?
I would ask the board's endorsement of the contract.
Okay. Let me go first to Don. He had a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had the flip side of what Steve had just brought up. Is there going to be enough time to successfully get the contract underway for the comprehensive plan rewrite?
So
That's a major
Charlene did
thing.
mention that, you know, that's one of the things that she'll tie into in the shorthand, but certainly is that foremost of what we're trying to accomplish going forward.
I mean, she's an excellent town planner, and she was here for the original comprehensive plan, which is about 3 times larger than that thing we're operating off of now. And that never really got the visibility and discussion.
No, we talked about it a
with
lot.
public meetings and everything, and she'd be the perfect person to be on board when that was, you know.
So to be clear, that would be one of our top priorities in this.
That's
interim
kind of what I'm
period.
saying, yeah.
Is that, Jill, what your read is too?
If we're saying for one of Charlene's top priorities or for her successor?
For her, to get that started.
I think it's a tall ask, given the parameters of the contract, but to Selectman Howell's point, it's not lost on me or Charlene that we need to get moving on that plan.
Okay.
With that, I'd be willing to ratify the contract that was signed.
Okay, is there a second?
Second?
I'll take a roll call then to ratify the contract. Don?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. So I don't think Charlene's listening in, but we're happy if she is. We're happy she's sticking around for a while.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Board.
Go next to old business, and this is, Joe, I'll turn this over to you as discussion of possible hardship exemptions.
So, thank you. And based on the conversation we had last week, I was really looking for the board to have a more substantive discussion building off of what we said last week. And if the board is looking to establish an exemption process for licensees based on the request we had, or if you'd be just relying upon the fee waiver or any other action.
Okay,
So really, it was meant to generate discussion with and amongst the board.
okay. I'll get it, Steve. Is there any comments on this? I have some reservations on an overall hardship exemption for the businesses.
Didn't Michael have a comment?
His
did, yeah.
comment was he wanted more information on what it, and I guess I agree with
What
that.
the financial impact was.
Yeah,
What the
so
financial impact would be.
if the board's willing, Selectman McCaskill did call me earlier in the day, and talked about this matter, and he asked me to convey his thoughts. And paraphrasing, first, my recommendation at this point for the board would to not limit general fund revenue. Given everything we have going on with the budget, Selectman McCaskill was in agreement with my statement. He indicated that he does not think we should be in the position of giving up revenue. And he also raised a point relative to the town of Chatham. He informed me that he, through his research, discovered that Chatham is doing something in the order of 2/3 reduction on some of their license fees. However, Selectman McCaskill reminded me of a good point, and it goes back to you all as a board, and the efforts you directed me and staff to take immediately once outdoor service was available. So where other towns such as Chatham required applicants to go through several weeks of regulatory hearings and regulatory applications, this board acted immediately and decisively so that we literally had outdoor table service the first day it was available. So he felt that the Chatham example, if you will, in this was not a legitimate example, if I can use that word.
Joel, just a quick question for you. Remind us what how much are the fees?
Well, the fee schedule varies from establishment to establishment based on the form of license, whether it's annual or seasonal, and then whether it's all alcohol or wine and malt. It's safe to say that it ranges anywhere from, say, about $1,400 to just under $1,900. And that's a one-time fee that the licensees pay when applying for or renewing a liquor license with the town.
That's pouring liquor.
Sorry, correct, that's a pouring license.
It's a pouring
Thank you.
license, okay.
A Section 12, as I call it.
Is there any other, Don?
Yeah, I can't see any other place to plop this discussion in, but I know Ed and I had it at the MMA. I'd love to be able to have an agenda item on the packaged goods licenses. Because, yeah, I think I mentioned this to the chair also. I'd love legal counsel to weigh in. Everybody's been having a fixation about the nip bottles, and I'm wondering if it's appropriate and legal to put a blanket restriction on, that would have to happen as a discussion before we actually got to renewing the licenses, but
Right.
coming up with some language that renews all the licenses with a blanket restriction, except that nips are prohibited.
Joel, and then I'll get to you, Ed.
Directly to that comment, I did confirm through the ABCC's website today that the local licensing authority, prior to the issuance or renewal of licenses, could make that kind of restriction for Section 15 or package stores. So the board does have the authority as the local licensing authority.
And Ed,
Go
I
through a
think.
process to
okay, thank
reduce
you.
those.
Didn't Wishtown ban just this past week? Didn't they restrict nips?
I'm
Who's
not
that?
talking about banning them, I'm talking about restricting them from sale from the license,
Okay.
excluding them.
But
Ed,
a
go
town
ahead.
did ban them. you're
A
right.
town did ban them,
I
though.
believe it was found.
Well, if you, in your email, you probably all got the notice from the Selectmen's Association.
So you're going to talk about
Meeting.
nips, yeah.
There are two examples of two towns that have taken action on them. I believe Chelsea and Falmouth. And they're examples of the direction they took in limiting or eliminating the sale of nips. It's an issue that many towns on the Cape are actively talking about right now. And there's also, a large feeling that on the Cape, if it were to happen, is to do it in a more coordinated fashion so as not to place any liquor sales establishment in one town at a disadvantage if the establishment across the border is still open for sale. So,
I'd still like it agendaed because this is coming dangerously close to deliberating on something that's not on the agenda.
Yeah.
But I was just trying to offer up something
Yeah. I think, Joe,
little-
we could add
a
that.
little creative to condition licenses rather than banning it through town bylaw.
I would agree. Joe, you okay with that? We can put it on the
Yep,
agenda and
absolutely.
talk about it, because it's separate from the waiver. Discussion on the waiver is, I guess our options would be to do nothing, provide a waiver, or some partial waiver. What's the, let me ask Cindy to weigh in to see how much of a, what her sense is.
what do you think, CW?
So I'd like some time to think about this more than to comment right now. Certainly, this has been the industry that has been hit the hardest with the restaurants. But I'd like to think about this a little bit longer to just mull it over. I wanted to hear what the conversation was with you all, and then see what we should suggest. As Joe mentioned, I was so proud of how we handled supporting the restaurants right away with the outdoor seating and how we continued it as long as we have. So let me just think about it if I could, without committing to anything.
Okay. You know, if I weigh the waiver versus our support, I would think that our support's more valuable, actually, but we'll see.
Absolutely. I mean, you've all been so wonderful, and how quickly we did it all together was unbelievable. While I watch other towns, and I mean, I sit on a meeting every other week with the other chambers, and I am truly blessed out of all of them. So your support has been recognized by the businesses, and just that we're having this conversation alone should also mirror that to them. Thank you for that.
So we should delay action on this?
Well, I don't think there's a big time frame.
Well, just because I'm saying that doesn't mean you have to.
Well, I don't think it's time sensitive because this will come up when we start considering the liquor licenses, right?
Well, the time sensitive is that Danielle had to send out the notices. The notices indicate the fee amount.
Okay.
But as Selectman McManus had said last week, that if they pay it and the town makes an action, there could be a rebate or a refund
Because
perhaps.
those notices have gone out.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah,
They
so
they
it's
need to
already
be signed by
done.
the establishments by the end
Okay.
of this month.
Okay.
Okay.
And it was the notices going out that I think spawned.
The way, okay, got the attention.
Yeah.
Don?
Yeah, and I just want to make it really clear, Mr. Chair, to Michael's point earlier about how he felt about revenue. In the instance of the Chatham Drama Guild that I brought up, that was an anomaly. I mean, that wasn't like half of the licenses out there. It was a completely unusable license because you couldn't have entertainment, and that was the only thing going on in the building that would have attracted people to go in to use the liquor license. So it was functionally not usable.
Right.
But for these other people, I'm not sure what the criteria that Chatham uses, but I think it's pretty stiff that it's not just that everybody gets a waiver.
Right. It's got to be basically black and white like that. Okay. Any other comments?
The other,
Cindy?
The other thing too, Larry, to take into consideration is now the new governor's orders where we now have a curfew. So they are losing that revenue as well. So I'm really torn with it. So I'm looking to you all for guidance as well. But as I said, and as we all know, the restaurants are the ones that were hit the hardest with this and continue to be hit the hardest. We have no idea what the winter is going to be like for them with the weather and with the uptick in the cases.
Joe, did you, I may have been daydreaming, did you respond to what our financial impact would be if we waived those?
I can tell you that last year, the revenue brought in by license renewals was about $76,000.
Okay, so it's significant then,
Correct.
obviously.
Yep.
I guess what we need to do, Steve, to your point, we'll bring this back and see what our, I think our options are, 0 or 100% or something in between. If we want to do something as
Yeah.
some compromise, so. Maybe Joe, you and Cindy can discuss this a little more and come back with a recommendation.
We're
We can
back
do
at
that.
it. Absolutely.
Is that okay with the rest of you, Don, Ed, and?
Yeah.
Because, I do agree, they're getting hit, and they're getting, but will be hit harder now with the new
Right.
directives. Okay, we'll leave it there then, and we'll come back in a week or two. Thank you, Cindy.
Okay, thank you.
Next on the agenda is the contracts. And we only have one tonight, and that's the CVC, which seems to be one we've gone through, I think, in some detail, as I recall, Joe.
So, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, this is the estoppel matter. I think we first talked about going back right before pandemic and then throughout the summer. Matt Fair, our attorney on contracts from KP Law, has been working with counsel from CVAC and the other parties impacted. So what you have here is the estoppel certificate. It's recommended by counsel. I looked at the last time you had such a document like this, and it would have been the, and I've already drawn a blank on it, it was the RNA. I can't remember what RNA stands for, but it was the solar array for the Monomoy
Okay.
High School building. So the standard has been that the board would vote to authorize me as an interim administrator to sign it, which is how you did the last one. I wouldn't have an objection if you had the chair sign it either, but it has been presented to you for your vote and direction to have someone sign.
Okay. Any comments, questions?
So where is this again?
It's under old business?
No, I mean, the
Contract.
array.
I'm gonna get it wrong. I believe it was one of the sides of the community center.
Yeah.
I want to
This
say
is
it's
a-
outside, but I always get it wrong.
I think where you're going with this, Don, is this the one where we had some questions about the location?
This would be the
Weren't those
time that they-
responded to?
This would be the time where they'd be motivated to actually be cooperative.
Yeah.
But I strongly believe that Joe can be cooperative back.
Yeah.
And this is a similar document that was sent to the town of Brewster as well, to my counterpart over in
Good.
Brewster, Peter Lombardo.
We're leaving people hanging. Let's just expand on Don and Joe, their concern. One of the abutters' concern was is that they didn't think they thought the solar array, generally speaking, was taking too much of the parking area around and
They thought it was going to be 20 feet tall.
20
so-
feet tall, so there was some misconception. And I think that was resolved with better sketches of what was actually going on, but I think I'd like to get that confirmed, that that's been resolved, that concern.
My point, if you permit me to say it, Mr. Chair, is that when we're the sponsor of a project, I have a higher expectation than somebody doing something commercially. And I know that they're required, and notice abutters, but there's nothing that says you can't do some outreach, especially as somebody who's plainly adjacent to it and would be affected by it. I guess one of the imponderables was too, regardless of whether it's 20 feet or 12 feet, if it's obscuring, the parking area, there's probably going to be lighted under whatever the canopy is. But nobody's talking to anybody.
Yeah.
And it doesn't appear that these folks talk to anybody unless they need a signature.
Well, I think your first point was well taken. Well, Joe, you'll be the bad guy and go after him, because the communication, they couldn't find it. It was under CVAC, but was nowhere on our town website. So I'm hoping, we talked about this, I think, at the last meeting. I'm hoping that we can either have an icon or some notification on our website, either shows it or directs it to the,
Absolutely. Points well.
because once they found the web, then they came back, and I think they're okay with the emails I got. But
And it's a little premature to say this, but I grew up in Yonkers, which isn't noted for the greatest transparency or honesty in things in the world. But I got to tell you, one thing that they do that we just don't do is, if somebody's asking for something like a ZBA kind of approval, they got to put up a really large sign. It's not quite as big as a billboard, but they got to put it up on the property that it affects, 30 days before anything happens, so that people driving past it could say, oh, they're doing something here? Forget about that. We're not even having a discussion. And I feel kind of badly that at least 2 residents have had to feel compelled to send emails and say, what is going on?
At this point, though, I'd entertain a motion for I think, for the interim town administrator to sign with
So
our
moved.
direction to follow up and on that item, and also to relook at the communication aspect.
So moved, to have him negotiate and execute.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any other discussion? Well, I hate to say this, Joe, but we're going to put it back into you, shoulders of the.
Well,
so, but-
no objection. So the estoppel gets to the scenario that existed right before a pandemic, where CVEC advised the town of Harwich and the town of Brewster that the original vendors were not living up to their end of the bargain. And so that's where each town was determining what they wanted to do. This board had directed me that we wanted to proceed with estoppel, which is similar to the town of Brewster. What Selectman Howell was making reference to is spot on. It's the other side of the project, if you will, the other canopy carport. And quite simply, CVEC's vendor jumped the gun and had submitted paperwork to the planning board without the town and administration knowledge. Once the planner made me aware of that, she then directed the applicant that they would be wise to revoke or remove their application. It was without prejudice. There were no notices sent, which leads to some of the confusion that was out there. So we're going to have them come back and do things in a proper manner and give far greater notice than what they've done before. So hopefully going forward, that'll clean some of the concerns up. But
Okay.
quite honestly, the vendor jumped the gun and didn't have the conversations that, quite frankly, they should be having with the town.
Yeah, okay, good. If there's no other comments, I'll take a roll call. Steve?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Ed?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
And that brings us to the town administrator's report.
Mercifully, I have nothing to add this evening, Mr. Chairman.
Joe, can I ask you, and this, not an agenda because it's just a comment, could you bring us up to speed on the Veterans Affair? Because I learned last week that Will Remillard is retired, and maybe just give us an update of where we stand on
Sure.
on that
The short
position.
answer is, and I'm going to butcher his name, so I'm, excuse me, that Carolyn and Mr. Quilty have been talking about office space, and they're working remotely right now. They have an individual that is replacing Will, that is going to eventually resume their office space in the town of Harwich for the towns that they cover. But right now, excuse me, Carolyn and her team have the appropriate contact names at the community center, and I'll be talking to the,
But functionally,
the
the
head of the
position
Veterans
still
Affairs Board.
exists. And
say again?
Functionally, the position it carries on, and it's still,
Absolutely,
it's still
without
in
question.
Harwich.
Yeah, it's been impacted by a pandemic.
Right.
So
but-
obviously, they're working remote. We still have a place for them to have a presence in Harwich once they can come back safely. I will reach out to Bob Lawton, who is the head of that group, to find out who the name of the agent is going forward and make sure that's publicized.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Moving to Selectmen's reports, Steve,
I have nothing.
Don?
I just have a question because, from that last subject.
Yeah.
I'm assuming there is no formal gathering on November 11th.
There is not.
That, just wanted to put
Yeah.
that out there.
Ed?
Yeah, I had heard that we weren't going to be doing a gathering, and rightly so, but I just, if everybody could remember,
Veterans
the
Day.
11th month of the 11th day of the
Yeah.
11th hour to have a thought for our fallen veterans. And sort of also speaking of those who I think have gone above and beyond defending our democratic values in this country, I want to give a thank to all the folks who here in Harwich and other towns up and down the Cape and throughout the country that served at the polls, making sure that every voter had a chance to cast their ballot.
Yeah.
Under these conditions, it was near on heroic activity.
My only comment, under normal circumstances, we would have Charlene in to give her a formal thank you, at least, for the years of service she has given to Harwich. And I feel bad that because remote, we did give a contract, we mentioned it, but I think I can speak for the board. It says, it's been much appreciated. She had a long tenure as town planner, then assistant town administrator, and back as town planner, so.
And she can hear it again in 100 days.
And she'll be here again, yeah. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Aye.
Thank you, Ed. I'll take a roll call. Don?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
And I'm an
Thought
aye.
Ed was going to stay.